I walked into my wife's law firm opening party expecting champagne and congratulations. Instead, I got pointed fingers, cruel laughter, and a divorce envelope handed to me like a restaurant bill. Everyone called me the test-run husband. My wife announced I was her firm's first case. She told me to sign the papers and leave, so I did exactly that. I signed, smiled, and walked out quietly. What she didn't know was that I'd been funding her dream with $20 million of my own money, and in the next 60 seconds, I was about to pull every single dollar out from under her. The phone calls started before I even reached my car. 456 missed calls. Then someone showed up at my door, and everything she'd built came crashing down in ways she never saw coming. My name is Trevor Ashford. I'm 46 years old, and for the past 22 years, I've been running Ashford Capital Management, a private equity firm I built from absolutely nothing. Started with $50,000 borrowed from my late father, and turned it into a portfolio worth north of $200 million. I don't say that to brag. I say it because understanding where I came from makes what happened next so much worse. But before we get into how I dismantled everything my wife built, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me what you would have done in my situation. And if this story resonates with you, smash that like button because you're about to hear how one quiet exit destroyed an entire empire. I met Victoria Cambridge at a fundraising gala 14 years ago. She was 28 then, fresh out of law school, working as an associate at Morrison & Blake, one of Chicago's most prestigious corporate law firms. She had this way of commanding a room without even trying: sharp intellect, sharper wit, and the kind of confidence that made senior partners nervous. When she laughed at my joke about corporate lawyers being professional argument starters, I knew I was done for. Our wedding was everything Victoria wanted. The Drake Hotel Ballroom, 300 guests, coverage in Chicago Luxury Magazine. She wore a custom Vera Wang gown that cost more than most people's cars, and I didn't care about the price tag because seeing her happy made every dollar worth it. We honeymooned in the Amalfi Coast, spent 3 weeks drinking wine and planning our future. She wanted to make partner at Morrison & Blake within 5 years, then eventually start her own firm specializing in corporate litigation and mergers. I told her I'd support her however she needed. For 13 years, I kept that promise. Victoria worked insane hours. 80-hour weeks were normal during trial preparation. Weekends disappeared into case files and depositions. I never complained because I understood ambition. Hell, I'd built my own company from nothing using the same obsessive dedication. But somewhere around year 10, things started changing in ways I didn't want to acknowledge. The late nights became later. The business trips multiplied like rabbits. Victoria started taking calls in other rooms, closing doors that used to stay open. She developed this habit of checking her phone constantly, face down on every surface, password protected with biometric security that she changed monthly. When I asked about it, she'd wave me off with explanations about client confidentiality and attorney-client privilege. Perfectly reasonable answers that felt perfectly wrong. Then came the social changes. Victoria joined a new gym that required special membership fees and had training sessions at odd hours. She started buying lingerie I never saw her wear, expensive pieces from boutiques I'd never heard her mention. Her perfume changed too, from the light floral scent she'd worn since college to something heavier, more exotic, the kind that clings to clothes and makes you wonder where someone's been spending their time. But the biggest red flag was how she talked about her career plans. For years, Victoria had discussed partnership at Morrison & Blake like it was her ultimate goal. Then suddenly, about 8 months ago, she started mentioning starting her own firm. Not in the distant future like we'd always planned, but soon. Within months. She had investors lined up, she said. Office space already picked out in the financial district. Everything was moving fast, too fast for something she'd supposedly just started planning. I didn't say anything because part of me was curious to see how long she'd keep up the charade. And honestly, another part of me was already calculating contingencies. I hadn't built a successful investment firm by ignoring warning signs or hoping problems would resolve themselves. When you see smoke, you start looking for fire, and when you find fire, you make sure you're not standing in the blast radius when everything explodes. The invitation arrived 3 weeks before the event. Heavy cardstock, embossed lettering, the kind of formal announcement that screams, "We've made it." Cambridge & Associates Grand Opening Celebration. Victoria had handed it to me over breakfast with this bright, expectant smile. "Trevor, this is it," she said, her eyes shining with excitement. "Everything we've worked toward. I want you there when I cut the ribbon on my own firm." "Our firm," I corrected gently. "We built this together." Her smile faltered for just a second. Of course, our firm. But the way she said it made it clear whose name was on the door and whose contributions she actually valued. The morning of the party, Victoria left early to oversee final preparations. She was wearing a navy Armani suit that probably cost $4,000, her hair styled in that severe bun she used for important meetings. She looked every inch the successful attorney about to launch her own practice. What she didn't look like was a woman grateful to the man who'd made it all possible. See, here's what Victoria didn't know I knew. About 6 months ago, when she'd come to me with her business plan for Cambridge & Associates, asking for investment capital to get the firm off the ground, I'd done my due diligence. Not just on her business model, which was solid, or her projected client list, which was impressive, but on her motivations. And what I found was interesting. Victoria had been having an affair with Nathan Cross, a managing partner at Morrison & Blake, for approximately 18 months. Nathan was 52, married with 3 kids, and apparently had a thing for ambitious young associates who reminded him of his glory days. The affair had started during a merger case they'd worked together, lots of late nights in conference rooms that led to hotel rooms in cities where nobody knew their names. I knew about Nathan because I paid people to know things. Detective Raymond Pierce, former Chicago PD, now running a private investigation firm that specialized in corporate intelligence and, when necessary, personal matters. Ray had given me everything: hotel receipts, photographs, text messages recovered from phone records, even audio recordings from a device Victoria had accidentally left running in her briefcase during one particularly indiscreet lunch meeting. But here's the thing that really got me. Nathan Cross was one of Victoria's primary investors in Cambridge & Associates. He'd committed $8 million to her startup, money he was pulling from a trust fund his father had established, money his wife knew nothing about. Victoria had another $5 million from various other investors, including $3 million from her parents who'd mortgaged their retirement home to support their daughter's dream. And then there was my contribution, $20 million. $20 million I'd wired to Cambridge & Associates' business account over a 6-month period, structured as a series of investments and loans that made me the firm's majority stakeholder. Victoria had the paperwork showing my investment, but what she didn't have was the full documentation showing that every single dollar could be recalled within 24 hours if certain conditions weren't met. Conditions I'd buried in the fine print that Victoria's excitement had made her skip over when signing. Those conditions were simple. The investment was contingent on our marriage remaining intact and on Victoria not engaging in any activities that would constitute breach of fiduciary duty to the firm's primary stakeholder, namely me. Adultery, by the legal definition I'd had my attorneys craft, absolutely constituted such a breach. Victoria thought she was so clever, getting me to fund her dream while she planned her escape with Nathan. What she didn't realize was that I'd been 3 steps ahead of her for months, building a trap so perfect she wouldn't see it until it had already snapped shut. The party was at the Four Seasons, because of course it was. Victoria had rented out their largest ballroom for the evening, the same room where we'd celebrated our 5th wedding anniversary. The irony wasn't lost on me. I arrived exactly on time, 7:00 p.m., wearing the Tom Ford suit Victoria had bought me for important occasions. If I was going to watch my marriage end, I was going to look damn good doing it. The moment I walked through those ballroom doors, I knew something was off. The energy in the room shifted like someone had changed the channel. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. People turned to look at me with expressions that ranged from pity to amusement to outright mockery. And then someone near the bar stage whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "The test-run husband is here." The laughter started small, just a few chuckles from the group nearest to me. But it spread through the room like ripples in a pond, growing louder and more confident as people realized I'd heard the comment. Test-run husband. Like I was some practice model Victoria had used before upgrading to the real thing. I stood there in the entrance, absorbing the atmosphere. Victoria's colleagues from Morrison & Blake were scattered throughout the room, expensive suits and practiced smiles, all of them in on some joke I was apparently the punchline for. Victoria's parents stood near the champagne fountain, looking uncomfortable but not surprised. And there, near the front of the room on a small stage where Victoria was supposed to give her opening remarks, was Nathan Cross, standing beside my wife with the kind of possessive posture that made everything perfectly clear. Victoria saw me then. Our eyes met across the crowded ballroom, and for a moment, just a moment, I saw something flicker in her expression. Guilt, maybe, or regret, or possibly just irritation that I'd actually shown up. Then her face hardened into professional detachment, and she whispered something to Nathan, who grinned and nodded. "Trevor, so glad you could make it," Victoria said, her voice carrying across the now silent room. She descended from the stage with Nathan following close behind like an obedient dog. "Could we have a word in private?" I followed them to a small conference room off the main ballroom. The door closed behind us with a soft click that sounded like a cell door slamming. Victoria pulled an envelope from her jacket pocket, crisp and white and obviously prepared in advance. "Trevor," Victoria said, her voice taking on that clipped, professional tone she used when delivering bad news to clients. "I think we both know this marriage hasn't been working for quite some time." Nathan stood by the window, not even pretending to hide his presence or his role in this little drama. He looked at me with something like pity, like he felt sorry for the poor fool who hadn't seen this coming. "This is an interesting venue for divorce papers," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Your firm's opening party." Victoria had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. "I thought it would be efficient. The first official case handled by Cambridge & Associates is our divorce. Consider it a statement about the firm's commitment to handling difficult situations with professionalism." "How thoughtful," I replied. "You're making our failed marriage into a marketing opportunity." "Don't be dramatic, Trevor," Victoria said, opening the envelope and pulling out a stack of legal documents. "These are standard dissolution papers. Community property split, no-fault divorce, clean and simple. I've already signed. All I need is your signature and we can both move forward with our lives." I took the papers and scanned them quickly. They were exactly what she said. A straightforward divorce with equitable asset distribution. Victoria would keep Cambridge & Associates. I'd keep Ashford Capital Management, and we'd split everything else down the middle. Except Victoria had made one crucial error in her calculations. She'd listed Cambridge & Associates' value at $15 million, accounting for the investments she knew about from Nathan, her parents, and various other backers, but she'd somehow forgotten to properly account for my $20 million contribution. The paperwork showed my investment as a standard marital asset to be split, rather than what it actually was, a recallable loan with specific performance requirements that she'd just violated. "This seems fairly straightforward," I said, pulling a pen from my jacket pocket. "You're sure this is what you want?" Victoria nodded firmly. "It's what we both need. You know that as well as I do." Nathan stepped forward then, placing his hand on Victoria's shoulder in a gesture of support that made my stomach turn. "For what it's worth, Trevor, no hard feelings. These things happen." Victoria and I didn't plan for this to develop the way it did. I looked at Nathan Cross, this man who'd helped destroy my marriage while stealing from his own family to fund my wife's business. "Of course, you didn't plan it," I said pleasantly. "Planning would require thinking about consequences, and neither of you seems particularly good at that." I signed every page without reading them, quick, efficient signatures that made Victoria's eyes widen slightly. She'd probably expected me to fight, to argue, to beg her to reconsider. Instead, I handed the papers back to her with a smile. "All done?" I said. "Anything else you need from me?" Victoria tucked the papers back into the envelope, relief obvious on her face. "No, that's everything. You're welcome to stay for the party if you'd like, but I understand if you'd rather go." "I think I'll pass on the celebration," I replied, turning toward the door. "But congratulations on the new firm, Victoria. I hope it's everything you dreamed it would be." I walked out of that conference room with my head high and my phone already in my hand. Behind me, I could hear Victoria and Nathan talking in low, relieved voices. They thought they'd won. They thought I'd just rolled over and given them everything they wanted without a fight. They had no idea that the real fight was just beginning, and it would be over before they even realized they'd lost. The Uber ride back to my penthouse took 15 minutes through Chicago traffic. During those 15 minutes, I made 3 phone calls that would dismantle everything Victoria had built. The first call was to my attorney, David Sherman. David and I had been friends since Northwestern, and he specialized in exactly the kind of nuclear option I was about to deploy. "David," I said when he answered, "execute Protocol 7. All accounts, all investments, everything we discussed." "Jesus, Trevor," David replied, but I could hear him already typing. "You're absolutely certain about this? She just handed me divorce papers at her firm's opening party, in front of Nathan Cross and half of Morrison and Blake's partnership." "I'm certain." "Give me 2 hours," David said. "Everything will be in motion by 10 p.m. The second call was to Raymond Pierce, my private investigator. "Ray, time to release the documentation. Everything we've collected. Nathan Cross's wife gets the full package delivered in person. Morrison and Blake's ethics board gets their copies tomorrow morning, and make sure the Illinois State Bar Association receives their set by end of business day." "Already prepared," Ray said. "The messenger is heading to Mrs. Cross's house right now. The other packages will be delivered as specified." The third call was the one that would hurt Victoria most. I dialed Charles Brennan, the managing partner at Morrison and Blake, and Nathan Cross's direct superior. "Charles, this is Trevor Ashford. I'm calling about Nathan Cross and some concerns regarding his ethical conduct that affect your firm's reputation." I spent the next 10 minutes laying out everything I knew about Nathan's affair with Victoria, his misappropriation of trust funds to invest in her firm, and the various conflicts of interest that had emerged from their relationship. I had documentation, I told Charles, and I was prepared to share it with the appropriate authorities if Morrison and Blake didn't take immediate action. Charles Brennan was many things, but stupid wasn't one of them. He thanked me for bringing this to his attention and assured me that the firm would conduct a thorough internal investigation, starting immediately. Translation: Nathan Cross's career was over, and Morrison and Blake would throw him under the bus so fast he wouldn't know what hit him. By the time I walked into my penthouse, the dominoes were already falling. I poured myself 3 fingers of Macallan 25 and settled into my leather chair overlooking the city. My phone started buzzing almost immediately, but I ignored it. Let them panic. Let them scramble to understand what was happening. I'd spent months planning this moment, and I was going to savor every second. The first real indication that Victoria understood the magnitude of her mistake came at 9:47 p.m. My phone showed 127 missed calls and twice that many text messages. Most were from Victoria, progressing from confused to angry to absolutely panicked. The messages told the story of her evening, falling apart in real time. 9:03 p.m. "Trevor, there's a problem with the firm's accounts. Call me." 9:15 p.m. "Trevor, this isn't funny. Where did the money go?" 9:28 p.m. "Trevor, $20 million is missing from the business account. What the hell did you do?" 9:35 p.m. "Please call me. We need to talk about this. There must be some mistake." 9:42 p.m. "Trevor, please. The investors are here. They're asking questions I can't answer." I took a slow sip of my scotch and continued reading. The progression was textbook. Denial giving way to anger, giving way to desperate pleading. But I wasn't interested in Victoria's feelings anymore. She'd made her choices, and now she was learning that choices have consequences. My phone rang again, Victoria's face filling the screen. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call, this time from Nathan Cross. Voicemail. Then Victoria again. Then her mother. Then Nathan again. Then a number I didn't recognize but assumed was someone from Cambridge and Associates. At 10:07 p.m. there was a knock on my door. Insistent, urgent pounding that echoed through my penthouse. I checked the security camera feed and saw Victoria standing in the hallway, still in that navy Armani suit but now looking decidedly less composed. Her hair had come loose from its severe bun, mascara was smudged under her eyes, and she was holding her phone like a weapon. I took another sip of scotch and walked to the door, opening it slowly. "Victoria," I said pleasantly, "this is unexpected." She pushed past me without waiting for an invitation, spinning around in my living room with wild eyes. "What did you do?" "The money, Trevor. Where's the money?" I closed the door and leaned against it, crossing my arms. "What money are you referring to? Don't play games with me. $20 million disappeared from Cambridge and Associates' account. The bank says it was a wire transfer authorized by the primary stakeholder. That's you, Trevor. You pulled the entire investment." I walked past her to refill my glass, taking my time with the pour. "Did I? That seems like something I might remember. Trevor, please. Victoria's voice cracked slightly. This isn't just about us anymore. I have other investors, people who trusted me. My parents mortgaged their house for this. Nathan put in $8 million. The office lease, the equipment, the staff salaries, all of it depends on that capital you promised. I turned to face her, and for the first time that evening, I let my real emotions show. Capital I promised? Let's be very clear about something, Victoria. I didn't promise anything. I made an investment contingent on certain conditions being met. You violated those conditions. Therefore, the investment was recalled. It's all perfectly legal and clearly outlined in the documents you signed. What conditions? Victoria demanded. There were no conditions. It was a standard investment agreement. Page 47, subsection 12, I said calmly. The investment remains valid contingent on the primary stakeholder maintaining fiduciary interest, free from conflicts of interest, ethical violations, or breaches of trust that would compromise the firm's integrity. Your affair with Nathan Cross, who is also an investor, constitutes a massive conflict of interest. Your use of my investment capital while planning to divorce me constitutes breach of trust. Therefore, the contract is void, and the investment is recalled. Victoria's face went white. You knew? This whole time you knew about Nathan? I've known for 18 months, I replied, since the first hotel room in Minneapolis during the Carmichael merger. I know about every dinner, every weekend getaway, every lie you told while planning your exit strategy. I know everything, Victoria. I just waited until you'd built something worth destroying before I took it away. She sank onto my couch, her legs apparently no longer able to support her weight. But my parents' money, Nathan's investment, you're destroying innocent people's lives. I laughed, actually laughed. Nathan Cross is innocent? The man who embezzled from his father's trust fund to impress you? The man who's currently being served with divorce papers from his wife of 25 years? The man whose legal career is about to implode when the Illinois State Bar Association receives documentation of his ethical violations tomorrow morning? That Nathan Cross? Victoria looked up at me with horror. You sent documentation to the Bar Association? I sent documentation to everyone who needed to see it. Morrison and Blake's Ethics Board, the State Bar, Nathan's wife, who, by the way, has already filed for divorce and frozen all marital assets, which includes that $8 million he invested in your firm. Oh, and I also notified the trust fund administrators about his misappropriation of fiduciary funds. Nathan's looking at potential criminal charges, Victoria. But sure, let's talk about innocent people. This is insane, Victoria whispered. You're destroying everything because I fell out of love with you? I crouched down in front of her, meeting her eyes directly. No, Victoria. I'm teaching you that actions have consequences. You didn't just fall out of love. You planned an elaborate betrayal, used my money to fund your escape, humiliated me in front of your colleagues, and thought you could walk away clean. This isn't about love. This is about respect, integrity, and the fundamental principle that you don't get to use someone and then throw them away without facing any consequences. My phone buzzed with another incoming call. I glanced at the screen and saw it was Charles Brennan from Morrison and Blake. I answered on speaker. Trevor, Charles said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. Nathan Cross has been terminated effective immediately. We've also conducted a review of the Cambridge & Associates situation, and I need to inform you that Morrison and Blake will be withdrawing our partnership commitment with the firm. Given the ethical complications that have emerged, we cannot associate our name with this venture. I understand completely, Charles, I replied, watching Victoria's face crumble as she heard her former firm pull their support. Thank you for handling this with such professionalism. After I hung up, Victoria just stared at me. You've destroyed everything, she said. The firm, Nathan's career, my reputation, everything I worked for is gone. No, I corrected gently. You destroyed everything when you decided betrayal was an acceptable business strategy. I just made sure you couldn't profit from it. What am I supposed to do now? Victoria asked, tears starting to stream down her face. I have staff depending on me. I have creditors expecting payment. I have a lease on office space I can't afford without your investment. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. You're a smart woman, Victoria, one of the smartest I've ever known. Figure it out the same way I did when I started with nothing. Build something real, something earned, something that doesn't depend on lying and cheating and using people who love you. Trevor, please, just give me something. Anything. My parents will lose their house if this firm fails. I turned back to face her. Your parents can contact my attorney. I'll structure a repayment plan for their investment that protects their home. But that's because they're innocent in this, Victoria. They believed in you, supported your dream, and don't deserve to suffer because their daughter chose to be ruthless. But you? You get nothing from me except the lesson you should have learned a long time ago. Character matters more than ambition, and integrity isn't optional. Victoria left my penthouse at 11:23 p.m., her expensive suit wrinkled, her makeup ruined, her entire life in shambles. I watched from my window as she got into her car and drove away, probably heading back to explain to her investors and staff how everything had fallen apart in a single evening. The next morning, my phone was still blowing up with calls and messages. Nathan Cross's attorney trying to negotiate some kind of settlement. Victoria's parents thanking me for the repayment plan while crying about their daughter's choices. Various investors in Cambridge and Associates trying to understand how they'd lost everything overnight. I ignored most of them, but there was one call I did take, from Sebastian, my son from my first marriage. He'd heard through the grapevine what had happened and called to check on me. "Dad," Sebastian said when I answered. "Mom told me about Victoria. Are you okay?" "I'm better than okay," I told him honestly. "I'm free." "Did you really pull $20 million in a single night?" "Every penny," I confirmed, "and I'd do it again in a heartbeat." Sebastian was quiet for a moment. "You know what's crazy, Dad? Most people would call what you did cruel or vindictive. But from where I'm sitting, it looks like justice." He was right, of course. This wasn't about revenge or cruelty. This was about consequences, about making sure that people who think they can use and discard others without repercussions learn that the world doesn't work that way. Victoria had spent months planning her exit, using my resources to build her dream while preparing to humiliate me publicly. She'd gambled that I'd be too weak or too in love to fight back. She'd gambled wrong. 6 months later, I ran into Victoria at a legal conference. She was working as an associate at a mid-sized firm, rebuilding her career from scratch after Cambridge and Associates had collapsed spectacularly. Nathan Cross had been disbarred and was facing criminal charges. His wife had taken everything in the divorce, including the house, the cars, and the kids' college funds. Victoria looked thinner, older, like the past 6 months had aged her a decade. When she saw me, she didn't approach or try to talk. She just nodded once, an acknowledgement of shared history and mutual destruction. I nodded back and walked away. There was nothing left to say. She'd learned her lesson, I'd moved on with my life, and the world had balanced itself out the way it always does when you refuse to let people treat you like disposable. That's the thing about being underestimated. People think quiet means weak. They think accommodating means pushover. They think silence means you don't notice what's happening. But sometimes the quietest person in the room is quiet because they're 3 steps ahead, planning moves you won't see coming until it's too late to stop them. Victoria called me a test-run husband at that party. She was right in a way. I was a test run for what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness and generosity for stupidity. She tested me, and she failed. And in failing, she lost everything she'd worked for. If you found this story satisfying, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me whether I went too far or if Victoria got exactly what she deserved. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more stories about ordinary people who refuse to be treated like disposable. Because everyone has a breaking point, and sometimes the quietest revenge is the one nobody sees coming until it's already destroyed everything they built on lies. Until next time, remember that underestimating someone isn't just a mistake. It's an opportunity for them to show you exactly what you should have been afraid of all along.